Hey everyone, Joey here, and today I am excited. Today we have something new, today we have something different. Today we have a device that is finally doing something better in the under $100 category, and it is the Mangmi Air X of all things. This can run PlayStation Portable without frame skip or hacks at a 2x for most games. It can run 3DS at native for a lot of games. It can run some GameCube games with some hacks at good frame rates. And I guess the kicker is, it is $90. Or, well, it is $70 US if you're lucky enough to get into the early bird. Otherwise, for pretty much everybody else, it's going to be $90 going forward. Yeah, that's right. So $70 early bird and $90 regular price. Mangmi has told me that this will be available for order early September, so a few weeks to go on that front. Any listings that you currently see on AliExpress is third-party resellers, and they have marked up the price. So I would suggest avoiding those and waiting for the official launch directly from Mangmi.com. For anybody that had a Retroid Pocket 2S, like I have here, it's the metal one, you know how special this device was when it released, at least the people who were paying attention. You had more power here at an $89 price point than any other device in the sub $100 category and even the sub $150 category. This was the next step up, but it didn't take off in the way that I think most of us expected. I fully expected that we would get a lot more devices in that same price range to compete with this. But instead, it kind of got discontinued, it's been forgotten, all of that. But it was a fantastic device, probably one of Retroid's best. And nobody else took up the mantle to make another successor or even compete with it. Instead, Anbernic released the H700 lineup when they had the RK3566s before. And so nothing really happened. But for the 2S, the biggest issue was the screen size for a lot of people. So imagine you can get the 2S now with a larger screen and the same power and for the same price. Yeah, it's been 2 years since the 2S released, but we are finally getting to that point now where at least one company is releasing a device that is jumping generations for actually playing games instead of the same old, here's another PlayStation 1 and Under device. So in a lot of ways, you can just consider this a wider 2S for today. And at least until Retroid decides that they want to use the Retroid Pocket Classics processor in a device like this for $99 or so, which they should be doing if they haven't done it already. So let's talk specs first. There is 3 colors. I have the gray, there is a black, and there is a white. I personally wish that I had the white. It looks awesome. There is a Snapdragon 662 processor inside. It is an older chip, but more than fine for the power, and still better than whatever else we get in the sub $100 category, and for the price as you see today. Not many benefits to Snapdragon in this price point, no real custom driver usage that you can do, but it does come in handy for battery life. There is 4 GB of RAM and 64 GB of internal storage. I don't love the small internal storage, but for what this can play and the price, it is fine. There's a fan, and we'll talk about that later. And we have a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS display up to 450 nits. Then we have Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 5.0, USB-C charging, but not fast charging, headphone jack, and SD card slot. All of this runs on Android 14, which is locked down for SyncThing usage, unfortunately. Taking a tour of the device, and we have the Dpad at the top. Not my favorite position, but it is fine here. The D-pad has a smooth texture to it, and I think this might be the point of contention for a lot of people. I would have preferred a normal style D-pad with grooves and a different texture and all of that, but that's just not what's here. And so even for me, I find this to be a bit on the slippery end, probably the lowest point of the device. However, accuracy-wise, it works out well. No issues with pulling off fighting moves or in platformers, but it's just slippery, and I wish it was a different texture. Then we have basically Retroid style Hall effect sticks, and they're good. Just not my favorite location. There's a small offset for controls, but not enough. And so any stick-heavy games are not going to be a fun time, as you would expect from a device that has sticks on the bottom. But looking at the actual sticks and checking them, there is no cardinal snapping issues. They're nice, they're accurate, and I found that they're pretty good. I think that any Retroid fans with the 3 Plus, the 4 and 4 Pro and 5 who like that layout of D-pad top and sticks bottom will like them here, but I don't see this winning over anybody that does not like that layout. So if you find the Retroids uncomfortable because of the sticks on the bottom, this isn't going to change your mind. On the button side, we have super tall, long travel buttons that are not silent, but I also wouldn't call them loud. Maybe don't listen to me because I have an Odin 2 Portal and my buttons are not loud at all, but everybody says those are loud. So I am not in that camp, and maybe I'm not the best person to talk about loudness for buttons. But I would say these are louder than my Odin 2 Portal's buttons, and they are louder than Anbernic's buttons, and they sound more like a Retroid Pocket 5, Retroid Pocket Mini, that sort of style for buttons. Then they do the unfortunate thing of having start and select next to each other on the bottom right. I'm not a fan of this personally. I prefer having them on opposite ends of the screen. And then on the left, we have home and back as you would expect on an Android handheld. At the top, we have super loud and clicky shoulder buttons. This, I am qualified to tell you, are actually loud and clicky, but they are good. And then we have actual analog triggers, and it's a nice thing to see, and it continues that whole Retroid Pocket 2S comparison, but bigger. Having tested the triggers out, the 100 mark hits quite a bit before the end of the triggers do, which can be a good thing for some people, and it can be a bad thing for others. It is something that they could possibly address over the air if they want to. There is also the power and volume buttons at the top and the exhaust for the fan. Now on the bottom, we have 2 slits on each side for speakers. There's an SD card slot, possible microphone input, headphone jack, and USB-C charging. Now on the speakers front, for down-firing speakers, they are pretty good to me. They're above average, definitely, in my personal opinion. I just wish they were front-firing. But whatever is happening here with the dual slits on each side sounds pretty good to me. Again, for the price, you're not going to complain. On the back is the fan intake, but also some nice curved grooves for ergonomics. These do help quite a bit. I'm a big fan of them rounding out the back like this. Overall, I think the D-pad top crowd will be very happy with this. The thumbs hitting the sticks aspect of it is pretty minimal overall. There will be some of that on your right thumb, but it's not crazy. And it is comfortable enough, all things considered. This is kind of like a TrimUI Smart Pro 2 in a lot of different ways. Let's talk screen now, and this is a 1920 by 1080p 60Hz IPS panel. I think the brightness slider might need some adjustments with the percentages, as it does seem to have very little difference when you go past the 50 or 60% mark compared to before that. So they might need some adjustments there. Otherwise, there is some visible ghosting, but not a lot. This isn't Odin 2 levels of ghosting, and it isn't anything that I would be concerned about, but it is there and it is slight. I wouldn't consider it a big deal. Now, the concern that I do have with the panel is that it is not a set 60 Hz, something that can likely be fixed over the air as other devices have. It is a bit below 60 Hz. That does mean, for those of you that are very susceptible to this, you could notice some stuttering in 60 Hz games, especially in RetroArch if you are susceptible to it. But it is very hard to notice, in my opinion. This isn't a very big deal. We are only 0.2 Hz off. This isn't as bad as something like the Anbernic H700 devices. The RG34XX had it really bad on stock OS, and most of the H700 lineup of devices from Anbernic have it really bad. This is not that. They are just very slightly off. Either way, it is something that should be fixed. My only other concern, display-wise, is it can get very, very hot. Depending on the content you're playing, or how bright you want to go, touching the screen can be uncomfortably warm to hot in some scenarios. And I guess that ties right into the fan. And there is 3 fan modes: silent, balance, and extreme. Silent turns on at CPU temps of 70 Celsius, and it turns off at 60 Celsius. Balance turns on at 60 Celsius and turns off at 50 Celsius. And extreme is always on. The extremely weird part about this is that the silent fan mode ramps up. So it is not a true silent mode, and it is not a set RPM. It does actually ramp up. Now on extreme, or when the fan actually does get going in any mode, it is kind of unbearable to me. It is not great from a noise perspective, and it is not air being pushed out, it is the coil whine and whine of the fan and everything. It is one of the more annoying parts about this device. Now, normally I would say that you don't need to use the fan, but unfortunately you actually do, because it will turn on even in silent mode for PSP or 3DS, even without performance mode on. Now, this is because of the heat. It does generate a lot of heat for this device, and so it is trying to cool it down, but the unfortunate part is the fan just is too noisy for me. As far as software goes, this is running Android 14, which does cause problems with syncing for anything behind Android's data storage, and as well as accessing anything behind Android's data storage. Now, Z-Archiver off the Play Store did work for being able to move files around for those, but I couldn't find a workaround for syncing. Otherwise, it is a normal Android build. They do have their own launcher. It takes a very long time to actually start up, and it is fairly bare bones. Personally, I would not use this in its current state, and maybe it is something that they can improve over time. But we do have access to a lot of different front ends in the world, so it's not a big deal. From the drop-down, you can enable the sidebar, which is tricky if you want to enable it this way, and it'll show you performance, or it'll show you an overlay on screen. There is an alternative way to get to the sidebar, and it is by pushing and holding the home button, and it'll pop up on the right. Now, this is where you would enable performance mode, and this will cause your device to heat up more. It'll give it more juice, and it basically overclocks the device to get more performance. During my live stream for testing games, I had this on for the entire period, but if I was using the device myself, I would never turn this on. Now, if you head over, you can swap to button mapping mode if you want to map on-screen buttons to controls. There is also a button layout switcher to go to Xbox layout as opposed to Nintendo layout. Then you have a turbo fire section and a joystick inversion section. Lastly, there is a small little quick settings area. Now, if you head into Android settings, Mangmi has their own handheld settings section. Some really cool features here that I actually have not seen before on another handheld. You can have it turn off Wi-Fi or Bluetooth after locking the device after a certain amount of time, or you can even shut it down after X number of days while it's sleeping. These are pretty cool. There is also a gamepad tester and a calibration app. You can adjust the joystick LEDs, and you can update the system through all of these menus. Overall, you get pretty much all of the features that you want from an Android device, and it's all here. Now, just quickly, given Anbernic's limitations in their Android software, the Air X does work in GeForce Now right out of the box, and the controls are recognized. Now, streaming as a whole isn't the absolute best, given the Wi-Fi 5 chip inside and all of that, but it is an option if you want to do it. I think we all know that I'm a streaming aficionado at this point with all the streaming that I do, and so looking at the Artemis decoding times, they are pretty high. And likely because this is an older Snapdragon, Artemis is regularly over 11 and 12 ms or higher, and services like XP Play for Xbox streaming are also like 16 ms on average. That is basically a full frame of latency. Now for comparison, good streaming devices are sub 1 ms and 6 to 7 ms at the high. Anything higher than that and you're not having a good time. So from my perspective, this does not pass the streaming tests on my end. And now we get to the battery discussion, and I had to test out a few different scenarios. which was difficult given that it takes a long time to charge this device. There is no fast charging, as I mentioned before. So it is very, very slow, and I hope you appreciate the amount of time it took me to get to all these numbers. Now, as always, with my numbers, this is full 100% to 0% drain, brightness at 100% for worst case scenario, Wi-Fi is on, volume is at 10%, and fan is on silent. For PSP, I was able to see 181 minutes or 3 hours basically of just straight PSP at 2x without performance mode on. With performance mode on, this dropped a bit to 166 minutes or 2 hours 46 minutes. Now, I did the same test without performance mode on at 50% brightness to see how much the panel brightness is affecting battery life, and I saw pretty much the exact same numbers, so it doesn't seem like it is affecting it that much. For 3DS, without performance mode, I saw 285 minutes or 4 hours 45 minutes of battery. With performance mode, this was 200 minutes or 3 hours and 20 minutes, which is a pretty sharp decline in battery using performance mode here. Now, I will say, for some titles on both systems, it will be necessary to use performance mode to get playable frame rates. Then we have Game Boy, and my reasoning here was just to see what the easiest system to emulate would be battery life-wise, and it was 400 minutes or 6 hours 40 minutes. For standby, over 24 hours, it was a consistent 3% loss, and the biggest annoyance, again, is just charging time, which is 100 minutes from 0 to 100%. And that's rough given the no fast charging here. So, long story short, I think these are good numbers overall, minus the charging speed, which really is just unfortunate, and it will be tough to get used to for a lot of people. Let's jump into some games and talk about them. First up, Android games wise, given the 64GB internal storage limit, I only had space to install Genshin Impact, and I wouldn't consider it playable. This was on all low settings, 30 FPS, and there is just enough hitching, just enough slowdown and everything with nothing happening on screen that it is not a great time overall. I would imagine most of the Gooner Android games will not run well on this. But let's take a look at RetroArch. Using integer scaling here for every system, and as long as you don't mind black bars, this is great for all systems from completely retro to Game Boys to PlayStation 1, and all of that is easily playable and upscaled in PlayStation if you want it. Now, I've said it many times, I'm a big fan of 16:9 screens, especially because of how big Game Boy Advance can get, and also because of how many more systems it opens you up to. Not only can you easily play 4x3 systems here, but it also opens you up to side-by-side DS. And we'll talk about Nintendo DS in a bit. My usual test for upscaled PlayStation is using DuckStation Standalone and Final Fantasy IX's Beginning. We are at 5x upscaled, and there's no slowdown here at all. So PS1 upscaled across the board is something you can easily do. Then let's take a look at Sega Dreamcast, and as always, no frame skip here or anything, native resolution, and no problems here for these games either. This is a perfect reason to buy this device. Dreamcast, PlayStation 1, we're going to talk about a few others. Now let's jump over to Nintendo 64 with M64 Plus FZ. N64's test game is always Mario Tennis. If Mario Tennis runs, all of Nintendo 64 is playable, and in some cases upscaled. And so we use M64 Plus FZ standalone because of the texture issues that happen with RetroArch, and with Mario Tennis especially. Mario Tennis is on the cusp of perfect at native resolution using Glide N64 Medium. It is close enough that for me, I would be happy finally calling another device besides the Retroid Pocket 2S as certified N64 for under $100. There's only ever been two, the 2S and now this, and they both have the exact same performance, funny enough. That is really what was interesting to me the most. While testing this device, the 2S is actually pretty much the exact same. So for anybody who has a 2S, you know what to expect here performance-wise when it comes to the Mangmi Air X. Then we get to PSP, and this is where things start to shine. Obviously, with the 2S's smaller screen, PSP was never on the menu, despite the ability to play it. PSP here, on the Air X, across the board, is playable. Actually, more than playable. I would certify this as PSP for a device. You can play everything at 1x, you can play many at 2x, and you can play some at 3x. All of this is without frame skip, without hacks like you would need on the TrimUI Smart Pro, and all of that. This is truly where the difference is. This is where you get the power to have proper PSP, which we have not seen for under $100 before. It is exciting, it is awesome. Nintendo 64, PSP, Dreamcast, under $100, this is awesome. But there's more! We get to 3DS with Azahar. Using Vulkan, native resolution, right eye rendering is disabled, and I was shocked to see how playable this is. Not even just playable. The only reason that I am hesitating to fully commit to saying that all of 3DS is playable at full speed on this device is because I haven't tested them all. Otherwise, everything that I've thrown at this runs at native resolution and full speed. Outside of compiling shaders, you are set here for 3DS, and that is absolute insanity to me. It is crazy. I am usually a harsh critic on these types of things, and this passes my tests. Now, you want to know what the crazy part is? Nintendo DS struggles more than 3DS does, and I'm not joking. Let's put Drastic away for now. We all know that Drastic can run easily on this device. Drastic can run on a potato. We know it will work. But on this device, with this power, you would want to use Melon DS standalone or the Melon DS Core in RetroArch because of retro achievements and all of that. The crazy thing, some games are right on the cusp of full speed with no room for fast forwarding at all. Like in Pokemon Black 2, for example, where I can't fast forward at all. There's not enough room at all, but it does play at full speed throughout the game. However, the title screen for Pokemon Black 2 has massive slowdown and drops, to the point where you're at 30 to 40 FPS, and everything's going bad. Now, Melon DS has always been hard to run, and I would consider this easily playable in a lot of scenarios and a good way to play DS games with retro achievements, but it is something you should be aware of. There are going to be some games and probably some scenes in games that will slow down if your plan is to use Melon DS. So just be aware of that fact. It is a weird scenario for me to want to give a passing grade for 3DS on a device, but not DS. That's what's happening here. Now we get to the bonus systems. These systems, I would not buy this device for. I would not even bother playing or trying. But this can be for the crazies who do want to try it. The only reason I put this in this video is because I'm going to get asked about it, so I have to show it. Otherwise, there is no reason for you to buy this device for these systems. For example, Dolphin. Dolphin is fun. Mario Kart Double Dash plays mostly full speed with VBI skip on as a hack. You can go further with hacks and such, but it is close enough here to be a decent time. Animal Crossing is another one. Small hiccups here and there, but completely playable for a lot of people. F-Zero is a big nope. Not going to happen, no matter what. Super Mario Sunshine, big nope. Not going to happen, no matter what. And so on and so on. For most of the GameCube catalog, it's not going to be playable. That goes for Wii as well. But there are going to be some lighter games that you could play. Now, PlayStation 2 is less sexy this way. Some JRPGs are playable, and this is with all hacks applied. I am using the fast preset in NetherSX2. Basically, it's making a PS2 look like a PS1 in this way. All sorts of hacks and speeds are applied, and you can get away with some games like AR Tonalico, Atelier Iris, other JRPGs, some Persona 3, although I did have some slowdown in Persona 3, but 99% of the PS2 library is not going to be playable here. No Burnout Revenge, no Shadow of the Colossus, none of that. So don't go in expecting it. And before you ask, no, Switch, even with custom drivers, and Wii U are both not playable here. Neither run well, neither are close to running well. I don't know about indies, that doesn't count as Switch games to me, but yeah, it's off the table. So if you're asking me what you buy this device for, you buy it for PlayStation Portable and under. I was really close to saying PS1 and under because I always have to say that for every device in the last 2 years. Finally, PSP and under, you buy this for. You could buy this for 3DS. I will certify it as 3DS, but that's where you stop. So Nintendo 64, awesome. PS1, awesome. Dreamcast, awesome. PSP, 3DS. I'll give it to DS because we talked about that, and everything under. But GameCube, PS2, Switch, PS3, Wii U, all of that, avoid this. So let's wrap up this long review. This device is exciting. This is awesome. This is Everything that I've been waiting for to finally happen in this price point for years now. I'm hoping this is the kick that this hobby needs to get more competitive with things in the sub $100 category, because up until this point, we have been stuck with whatever Anbernic decides to release. And it was continually just the same processing power over and over and over. Somehow they convinced everybody that the RK3566 was good, then the H700 was good after that, when there are devices that can be released in this price point with more power. But we've been stuck with that for so very long that it is so nice to see at an even $70 to $90 price point that there's a device that changes things. The Mangmi Air X finally does what I've been waiting for. It jumps that generation gap for $70 to $90. It is a steal for what you're getting here. I can't put it any other way. There is no other competing device right now in the sub $100 category that is anywhere close to the performance of this that you can buy at regular price, not discounted or anything like that. This is it. This is what you're getting. Now, obviously, I do have concerns on my part. We talked about them throughout the video, but just to kind of consolidate them here at the end of the video, Mangmi is a new company with unknown origins and unknown reliability, something to be wary of. The screen is not the greatest, but certainly not an issue at this price point at all. Main concerns for me is the heat and not being able to set a 60 Hertz. The fan can be quite annoying, and there is no way around it. Lastly, the ergonomics can be tricky for stick-heavy games, which is the usual downside of Dpad top handhelds, with not enough room for offset controls. Otherwise, outside of little nitpicking and things like that, no, this is an absolute steal of a device. It is an easy recommendation for myself. It is an easy purchase for anybody that wants one. I am hoping this opens the floodgates for other competitors to jump in now for the sub $100 category and start putting the screws to Anbernic that has just rested on their laurels for so long by not innovating like this. It is finally something, somebody did it, where we have something we can play for under $100 that bridges gaps to another generation. So as you can tell, I'm pretty happy about that. Easy recommendation from my end. If you want to buy one, I think I have a link in the description so you can check that out. But otherwise, don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow. Come join me on the Discord to talk all about retro handhelds. Support me through YouTube membership if you like my stuff. And hope you all have a good one.